I moved to China, I was sort of shocked. I like the word deliciousness. Deliciousness. When you start a business, it literally will be your life. Or, in the morning, all the way until when you go to sleep, it's all I think about and it's all I do. And if that's not something you're passionate about, I just feel like it's never going to be a success. You have to just make that leap. How am I going to do this and this and this and this and this and this? Get out there. You'll really start to see that it is quite easy.
I'm Darian.
I'm Elena, and this is our podcast, Step into Success,
where we give you an inside look at how people are currently creating success in their respective fields.
Our mission is to bring you into the trenches for an inside view and hopefully give some inspiration and knowledge as you work towards success in your own way.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Step into Success. Today's guest comes all the way from England, one of my good friends, Thomas Palmer. And I'm not going to get too much into the introduction. I'm going to let him introduce himself. He has a business called Yep Kitchen. And Tom, can you just tell us who you are, what you do, and what is Yep Kitchen?
Yeah, thanks, Darian. It's great to be on your podcast. Thanks so much for inviting me. My name's Thomas, both fine. Recently founded a food company called Yep Kitchen, which is basically a celebration of my time in China. We're now creating a bunch of really tasty chili oils and ferments for the UK market.
Awesome. That is really cool. So you mentioned your time in China. Can you tell us a little bit? So you're from England, but you spent some time in China. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and tell us like how that started? What did you do over there?
Yeah, so I'm from Hampshire, which is sort of about an hour and a half west of London. And then in 2013, when I was 21, many moons ago, I moved to China to teach English for a year. And then 1 year turned into 10. And now 10 years later, I'm living in London in the UK and have a Chinese food business. So it's quite like a nice sort of full circle. But the time in China was very life-changing for me, for sure. I think it's like one of the things I would say to anyone who is asking for like any sort of life advice, or my kids, if I ever have any, would be to spend at least a year living in a foreign country, because it just opens you up to so many things that you just can't access if you spend all of your life in the country that you grow up in. So massive advocate for traveling and experiencing like other cultures, because it just really sort of opens you up to appreciate different things and look at life perhaps a little bit differently. And I feel like coming back to the UK this time, I feel like a completely different person than the person who left the UK 10 years ago.
So Tom, this is a little bit off script. It's not necessarily about Yep Kitchen like we were talking about, but as far as travel goes, how are things there in the UK with and what I mean is here in America, it seems like there's a lot of people who are maybe on the fence about traveling. They're worried about kind of everything that's going on in the world. You said you're a huge travel advocate. I feel like I am as well. What would you say to anyone who is maybe on the fence and wondering if they should do that year abroad or take some trips somewhere? Like, what would you say to those people that are, concerned?
I mean, I think if you have concerns, then you can use that as a factor to decide where you go, because, there are loads of countries that you can travel to get that experience and just sort of push yourself out that are incredibly safe environments that, shouldn't give you any worries. And then perhaps after you've done it, you get the idea of, okay, that wasn't too hard, that wasn't too tricky. And then you can start to sort of dive into the more, I don't even know the word you describe them, but the sort of more categorized as dangerous places.
Right, the more remote
more
places.
Out of your comfort zone. Yeah, I mean, and places perhaps where language is an issue, because that's also a big barrier for people when you travel is, how will you communicate? So I think, go to an English speaking country first if you're also an English speaker, or, spend a bit of time learning the language before you go. But I think it's really just that you have to just make that leap. I'm personally, I love doing that anyway. I like taking risks and sort of jumping into the unknown. So I don't have a difficulty with it, but I get where people come from, where it's tough to sort of make the jump. But perhaps find a travel buddy as well, someone that can sort of back you up, and you can go together and sort of, enjoy the trip as a duo.
Yes, good deal.
Very cool. So your time in China inspired you to start Yep Kitchen. Is there something like you had a favorite meal or something that you really enjoyed there all the time? Or like what made that connection from your time in China to now coming back to England and you started this food business? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think, I think Darian can agree with me as well that food in China is very different to the food that you get outside of China. So I grew up eating Chinese food, but when I moved to China, I was sort of shocked at how different it was, how many different ingredients there were and flavors and recipes that I'd never heard of before. So I think as soon as I got there, it was just this mad experience of sort of senses and just trying out all these different things. And I just loved all of them. I mean, mostly the spicy food, which is from the Southwest. And I found myself just, eating that breakfast, lunch, dinner really for years. So it was then when I was making trips back to the UK during the time living there that I was like missing food from home, and I'd sort of big it up in my head. And then when I'd get back and I'd order it, I'd be like a bit disappointed. Like, it's not as good as Chinese food. So I think it was at that point where I realized that actually this is my food. This is the food that I want to spend my life eating. So then I noticed there was a bit of a gap in the market in the UK in terms of Chinese products. There's quite a lot of options now for Chinese restaurants. And you have the sort of like regional aspects. In London anyway, you can go for hot pot, or you can go for a Sichuan meal, or you can go for, typical Beijing meal. That wasn't a thing 10 years ago, but still the products are very limited. You don't really have much choice. So that was the sort of idea of how I can bring over perhaps some of my experience and some of the things that I love from Chinese food to the UK.
Very cool. So you're kind of trying to help residents within the UK be able to bring that into their own kitchens. Is that my understanding? Like there's options if they want to go out to eat, but bringing it in their own home.
Yeah, absolutely. We're focusing on the like at-home cooking sector. So creating products that you can purchase in, a local shop, deli, and then use it at home to sort of experiment and have fun with, because I feel like that's the part of Chinese food that is not very well represented, and often it's really sugary or very sweet. I mean, when we go to the supermarket, you can buy these they're like stir fry kits, and you can pick like a sauce, the vegetable section, and then a piece of protein, and all of the sauces are like sweet chili or like sweet and sour, like sweet plum, and everything is just really, really sugary, really sweet. But that's not really the case in China. So yeah, that was my sort of thought process, was why is nobody making the spicier, like umami flavors that are very typical of Chinese food?
Mm. Do you think that has to do with like a difference between Eastern and Western palates and just kind of what we're used to? And how are you helping to bridge that gap, I guess, with your products? Like, do you offer recipes for people to be able to get in there and, try things out, something that's maybe outside their comfort zone when it comes to cooking with these different flavors?
Yeah, I think like the first part that you said, I think now a lot of the products that we have are very perhaps outdated. They're not necessarily wrong or bad, because at one point they were a good representation of Chinese food for people living in the UK, because that's what they had experienced. But now travel is more common, and the globe is more connected. People have a better idea and understanding of what actual local food tastes like in the regions where it's from. And, you know, they go on holiday somewhere, they try the food, they love it. And then when they come home, they can't access it. So I think products, especially in the UK now, a lot of these regional products are becoming more and more popular, and there's becoming a demand for them because people want to try and taste the authentic flavors. And I think that's why there's a room for, you know, increased variety in a section where perhaps chili oil before you maybe had one option, that's chili oil, you buy that one or you don't buy chili oil. But now, you know, you have 10 or 15 or 20 different options. You can pick on which region you want the chili oil from, or which chilies it's made from, or the heat intensity, things like that. So I think that's sort of why why we're trying to focus on really regional areas, because there's increased interest in them.
Very neat. I guess, yeah, I didn't really know that, how much of a difference is between the different regions. At least in America, I feel like it's kind of similar.
Yeah.
We go to the store and you see, you know,
You
the
get some
standard
orange
brands.
chicken or some, you know, you get some orange chicken, some sweet and sour chicken, some teriyaki chicken.
Those are the ones that I grew up with too, you know, like, yeah, I remember going to China and looking for the dishes that I was familiar with. So I'd be in a restaurant, like, give me some prawn toast, I'll have the crispy seaweed, chicken balls. And they're like, yeah, we don't have any of those.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was literally, it was, the one thing I was disappointed by was prawn toast, because that is still one of my favorite Chinese dishes, even though it's like, it's not that typical. It's probably more typical in like Hong Kong. But I mean, certainly not in Beijing. You don't find prawn toast very, very, very rarely.
Hey, but now though, in England, people can get the prawn toast and just put your sauce on top of it, and then boom, they got best of both worlds, man. I mean, that is bridging. That is the bridging of the gap that you're doing.
Man, we actually live above a Chinese Vietnamese restaurant, and I'll tell you now, that has happened many of times in my house.
Nice.
Prawn
Hey,
toast and chili oil on top. It's a win.
So Tom, did you always want to own your own business? Did you always want to be an entrepreneur and start your own company? Or did it happen simply because you saw that opportunity in the market?
No, I definitely say that I've always wanted to. My mum, my dad, and my sister all own businesses as well. So I was sort of the one who didn't, and that didn't, you know, force me into doing it. It just, you know, gave me the inspiration that it's possible when you have family members doing it as well. But yeah, no, definitely always wanted to, and had a few failed attempts beforehand, before this one. Perhaps not failed, maybe not the right word, but businesses that didn't come into fruition. Yeah, just, you know, a friend of mine, we had an idea for an education company when we were living in China. It was based around like teacher training, because we'd both been teacher trainers for quite a long time. Wanted to offer like schools that didn't have an in-house training team the option to recruit us to come in and train their teachers, basically. But yeah, we started it. We had a name, we had a logo, and then I think actually my friend's wife became pregnant, and we just sort of didn't follow through with it. So I wouldn't say it's a failure. It just didn't sort of come to fruition. So yeah, definitely always wanted to.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's, you know, good for, especially, I mean, even for myself and people in the audience listening, like, just because you start a business that doesn't end up maybe working out the way that when you started it you envisioned, it doesn't mean it's like a failure in any way. It's a learning. I'm sure you picked up some valuable things from there that is now helping you be so successful with Yup Kitchen.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think you know, perhaps, especially for me, like, as much as I loved education, and I still do, it wasn't ever like, it was never like, I knew it's never going to be my long-term sort of career. And I still teach now. I still do some private tutoring on the side, but it's definitely like this business now I'm incredibly passionate about and like hyper focused on it. And I wasn't on the previous one. So I think that's probably why it didn't come to fruition, because it just wasn't the right one, you know, and you try something and then, you know, okay, this is perhaps it. And try again, and eventually you'll hit one that's just like, God, this is great. I'm absolutely loving this, and it becomes sort of effortless because you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you kind of mentioned like maybe there's a little bit more passion behind this one than some of the other endeavors that you've tried. Because I know in the sort of entrepreneurial field, there's kind of two different camps. There's people that are like, no, just do your market research and, you know, find what's going to work. And then there's other people that are like, if you aren't doing something you love, you're going to hate it. So what's your take on starting a business and it's sort of that balancing of like market opportunity and passion for what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, like, it really was a case of starting this business because I wanted to. And, you know, I didn't perhaps look massively into how big or how small or the size of the opportunity was at the beginning. I simply started it because I really wanted to start it. And I felt like, you know, this was an opportunity for me to show something that I'm proud of, build something, and let's see in 4, 5, 6 months' time how it's doing, and, you know, if there's a need for this product. Because especially in my case, going from China to the UK, it was difficult to do any like real market research from China because you're sort of limited to what you find on Google, and sometimes that's not always as accurate as the situation may be because you have, you know, Google ads involved and certain like SEO things that are going to make you see certain things, and it's quite difficult to actually find what you're looking for on Google sometimes. So yeah, I would say also consider the fact that when you start a business, it literally will be your life for, you know, in the morning all the way until when you go to sleep. It's all I think about and it's all I do. And if that's not something you're passionate about, I just feel like it's never going to be a success because it's your living and breathing, you know, being an entrepreneur and starting a business, because you do everything, you know. When I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about like ideas, what I'm going to do tomorrow. And, you know, if that's something that you're not incredibly passionate about, I just don't see how it's going to be a success.
Yeah. So Tom, right then you were talking about, you know, starting this business and it's your passion and you just wanted to try it for 5 or 6 months and see, you know, what happened, if there's room for it in the marketplace. Let me ask you this. So getting into the actual business itself now, like, how did you start it? Like, so I get it. You were in China and we know your background there a little bit. You came to the UK, realized that there wasn't the same type of food. What was it? So how did you start doing it? Did you just bring a bunch of like sauce with you and give it out to people and see if they liked it, or like what happened? How did you, first step, I guess?
Yeah, the first steps, I think, like very, very first step was actually making the changes in my life that enabled me to start. Like, starting the business itself is really easy actually, but the difficult part was, you know, the block in like making that jump. And I was feeling it for quite a long time that I wasn't fully like fulfilled in my job, and I kind of wanted to leave China, but I didn't, and didn't want to just leave it all behind. So it was taking that jump to just like, right, let's just do it. Let's just quit my job. Let's just go back home and let's start this business. And then once I got back, it was sort of really easy, and I had nothing stopping me from doing it. I had no distractions. So the very, very first thing I did was work on the logo, which was really fun because I like design bits. And then I started making the chili oil here with the chilies available in the UK. I brought back some with me, but not a lot, and they ran out quite quickly. And then I was unable to make the same quality product with the chilies available in the UK. So that's when I realized I'm going to have to use the chilies from Chengdu. So then I started to find suppliers for these chilies, got them sent to the UK as like a sample. Then we made some like mini ones. We put out like an Insta ad, and we just sent a bunch of chili oil to random people, got some feedback. And then it was just sort of like the ball was rolling. And then, you know, I ordered 2,000 jars. I was like, well, 2,000 jars on the way now, so better find something to fill them with. And it was a case of like put yourself, like make the financial commitments that, okay, this has started now. And then, just everything just started happening. And I just sort of, okay, well, the jars are coming now, so I'm going to need something to put the jars in. Okay, let's get a box. And then we got a box made, and then we had the box. And then we were like, well, we want some artwork in the box, so let's design the artwork. And it all just started, the ball's rolling and everything just sort of starts moving.
Very cool. So once you kind of had some skin in the game and were like fully committed, it just sort of all started happening almost like organically. Did you face any challenges in the beginning that you had to overcome?
100,000,000%, yeah. Literally. It was quite funny actually, because I thought, like, I'm in control of this. I was like, this is all down to me. So if I put in 110%, it's going to be perfect. What could go wrong? But, even if you do put in, every ounce of effort that you've got, things are still going to go wrong. And, I think definitely now I realize, and still today, things go wrong all the time, like literally all the time. It's a problem solving game, really. And the sooner you sort of realize that, I think the better, because you're going to be faced with difficulties all the time. One in particular was the jars that I just mentioned to you. Because I was getting the spices from China, I just thought, let's get everything from China, because, it's pretty common knowledge that there's, cheaper products in China. So we got our glass jars from there, our packaging from there, spices, and that seemed like a smart move. But obviously didn't consider sort of lead times. You're not just relying on the factory making the jars. They need to then send them to the forwarding agent, who then needs to put them on the ship, who's then going to go through various regions around, like, global shipping routes. And there's so many factors that could go wrong, and you don't really think about that at the beginning. And then basically I was waiting about 3 months for these jars to arrive. Oh, wow. Finally got here, and I was so pumped. I even borrowed my brother-in-law's car to drive to the port, which is about 2 hours away from London, to pick them up myself, because I've been waiting for them for so long. I was like, nothing else can go wrong, so I'm going to pick them up from the port myself. And then when they got to the border, I got a call from the border agency or whatever, and they were like, oh, what's your EORI number so we can clear the package? I was like, what? Who's EORI? And then I ended up having to get the EORI number, but it was going to take about 5 days. So then I had to pay storage at the port for 5 days, ended up costing me loads more money. And then finally got the jars. We opened one box, took like a picture, posted it on Instagram to be like, Chilio's coming tomorrow, guys. The jars are finally here. And then when I actually closer inspected the jars, when I got back to my kitchen, most of the labels were stuck on upside down. Some of them were peeling off. Some of them were stuck to the box. So when you pull the jar out, it just like ripped the label off.
How did you feel when that happened? Like, what was going through your mind right there?
Yeah, it was really tough. It actually was really, really, really tough, because I got so excited for months about like this moment, and we'd been building so much, all the hype, and it was all public as well, that we were showing everyone like 5 days to go, 3 days to go. And then the day it was supposed to launch, all the jars were messed up. And yeah, it was really tough, man. I was really, really quite upset about it, actually, because it was the first time there was a really big mess up. Yeah, so it was really tough, man. But looking back now, that's because I wasn't expecting it. I was like, nothing can go wrong. It's ordered the jars arrive, we put stuff in, we go. So yeah, that's a funny story now that I can tell that it was it was definitely a moment to remember.
Yeah, sounds like it. So tip for other people going into this, anticipate some hiccups along the way, just from the start, and just be prepared for that.
They absolutely will come, like guaranteed. So you have to just be prepared for them, because then when they arrive, you're ready to handle it, because it's a guarantee, 100%. You will have hiccups, bumps, issues, whatever you want to call them.
So do you have everything sorted out with the jars now? I mean, are you now, when you order, are you still getting as many problems, or are you not getting from China anymore?
Yeah, so absolutely, we looked at ways to sort of streamline the supply chain, just make things more efficient. Also wanted to be more, conscious of the environment, and we realized that actually, there are a bunch of suppliers and manufacturers in Europe that can be equally as cheap as China, because at the beginning, I think you really need to think, cost consciously. When you're starting a very, very small business, survival is paramount, and I think finding the most cost-effective suppliers is an important factor of that. And then when you start to grow, you can start to think more about your, environmental factors, because, in the grand scheme of things, somebody making 100 jars of chili oil at home isn't going to massively impact the environment. But if you're making 10,000 jars of chili oil out of a factory, it is. So then you need to start thinking about your environmental impact. So we now, the only thing we get from China now is our spices, because that's the only thing we need to get from China. Everything else is done as locally as possible. We get all of our fresh produce from various suppliers in the UK or in Europe. As with our jars, we get them from a UK distributor. So I can basically order jars, they'll be with me in 2 days.
That's much better than 3 months.
Yeah,
For sure.
It's crazily enough, it's cheaper, which is nuts. So once the jar itself is cheaper in China, but once you add the duty, tax, VAT, all the shipping costs, your landed cost is so much higher than probably your local producer, and you get it in a fraction of the time.
And hopefully with less hiccups and easier to remedy the situation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely when hiccups come, when you're handling, with time zones and manufacturers that are miles away from you that have never, seen, you probably never even heard your voice. It's probably all just done through emails, and it just makes it so much more challenging.
Hey, Tom, one thing I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are, thinking about a business that involves importing products. And I hear you throwing out a lot of words like EORI, VAT, all of these supply chain and tax-related terms. So for us to have a better understanding, how difficult was it to learn the supply chain side of the business? You've got the creative the creative side down, the product, what you want. How difficult was it learning the supply chain and the importing and all of that? And what advice would you have for anybody else who might have to navigate that themselves?
Yeah, I think supply chain is definitely one area that if you're not working in that industry, there's really no need for you to know about it. And that was the same case for me when I started this business. I had absolutely no clue about supply chain related matters, which is why I made mistakes at the start. And I think identifying your weaknesses at the beginning and working on how you can improve them is key. And for me, supply chain, I had no idea. I jumped into it by myself. I made mistakes. I ended up spending more money, wasting time, and adding stress. So what I've done now is pay for professionals who work in supply chain to handle those imports for me. Ultimately, it saved me money. It saved me a lot of stress, and it saved me time. And then it gives me a chance to actually learn about these things with a professional by my side. So we have a forwarding agent now who handles all of the imports coming in from China. And since working with them, I've been able to learn a lot about how to do these things on my own. We still chose not to. We still just use them because they're more efficient in handling the situation. So I think definitely advice-wise, if supply chain isn't your expertise, then that's one of the areas where just spending that little bit of money, even though you're trying to save money initially, in the long run, you're probably going to waste money because you'll make mistakes because you don't know how to do it properly. So, choosing where you invest your money is a very wise move, I think.
So can we just touch base on your marketing strategy, like starting off, that led to you getting those first sales? I know you kind of mentioned that it was very public, your countdown to your product launch. Can you speak a little bit more about how you started driving sales for your product?
Yeah, so I think one factor that I used was what's called a minimum viable product. And basically it's a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And in this book, he talks about this minimum viable product, which means taking a product that isn't fully finished to market first, and then using those initial sales to develop the product into the finished one. So we basically, it's a really interesting model, and it's worked very well for us. We were able to get really, really good, accurate feedback from paying customers very early on, which then went into the development of the product. So we did a soft launch in November 2022, which was the one I was telling you about, where we were on Instagram, like, it's coming, guys, get ready, like 3, 2, 1. And then from November to June 2023, we were using that branding, which was sort of, again, a soft launch branding. It wasn't the finished one. And during that time, we did loads of farmers markets, which was a really, really good way to get sales and get customers straight away, because, unless you're spending a lot on Instagram ads or things like that, to generate online sales from the very beginning is really difficult. So I found, I could spend £50 on an Instagram ad that's seen by Instagram's very good at making you think that it's seen, and like by so many people, you get like 10,000 impressions, maybe like 5 clicks, then maybe 1 purchase. But you could spend £50 on going to your local farmer's market. You meet 50 customers face to face. They buy your product. They come back the following week. They tell you about the product, tell you what they liked, what they didn't like. And those interactions were so valuable at the beginning. So I really would give anyone the advice to do the same and not spend loads of time developing your product pre-customer launch, because then when you launch it, and if you've made mistakes, you're so far into the development, it's going to be really hard to make those changes. A, because you're really invested in it, and B, you spent a lot of money on it. So get the product out to people earlier before it's finished, and use their feedback to develop your product more.
That's really interesting. I honestly I've not heard that before. So that's some really good advice. I think a lot of people probably approach it the other way. So, and then like you said, you're invested in time, money, your personal, your soul is in it. So.
Yeah. And when we launched in July 2023, our full brand launch, we had a bigger customer base because we'd already been in business for 6 or 7 months. We had paying customers. We had more exposure. So when we did do our full launch with our final branding, the final recipes, everything's locked in, we had more people watching and more people ready to purchase our products. I think it's made a big difference.
I really love your branding, speaking of.
Absolutely.
It's very unique, and it's very colorful and just really fun. How did you kind of decide on that? Was there a process of, you mentioned you kind of like doing the design bits, and how did you go from, ground zero to your final branding?
Yeah. So if we talk about them in 2 stages, the pre-launch and then the full launch branding. So the pre-launch branding was mostly done by myself and my partner. He's an architect, so has some computer skills that I do not have. So he was able to help, make edits and things to the small details on the labels. So yeah, first bit was very much in-house. Let's just get something that we can get out to people and that's compliant with law. And then the full brand launch, we chose to go with a creative brand agency. No, not even an agency, just a creative brand actually. They're called Plastered 8, and they were very, very special brand, I guess, because I was a massive fan of them for 10 years living in China. And, since day one, I've been buying their T-shirts and gifting their products to people. They basically create just this really incredible Chinese artwork it is quite traditional, but it's also very playful and very fun and very modern at the same time. So I reached out to the founder of that company to ask him, if he was interested in, creating the brand for us. So then myself, the founder, and the artist, the three of us worked together for a couple of months in the background, designing the current branding that you see for Yep Kitchen. So that was the biggest spend we'd made, but I felt like it was the right way and the right thing to do, because we are trying to sort of showcase China in a really authentic and fun way, because that's the experience I had in China. It was super, super fun. It was super authentic, and I loved it. And now I wanted to showcase that with our products. So I wouldn't have the skill sets to do that. And as I mentioned previously, identify your weaknesses and spend and invest in those areas. And that's what we decided to do. And it's been a huge success. And we have, so much positive feedback from the branding and the artwork. And, I think that's testament to the artist and their knowledge of, China and Chinese culture, because now, our product looks authentic, and I wouldn't have been able to achieve that on my own. So yeah, it was definitely a combination of skills.
That's really interesting. Just kind of how many times you've mentioned identifying your weakness and then almost filling in those gaps with a supportive team. So did you start this just kind of you, or maybe you and one other person? And how has your team, or at least people that you have drawn in for support at different times, how has that grown since the inception of your business?
Yeah, so launch was definitely just me, mostly on my own, with my partner helping. At that point, he was also in like a job hunt, because we'd both just left our jobs and moved to the UK. So he had more time. So we were working on it together at the beginning, and it was quite a fun thing to do with the two of us. But then once he started working full time, it was down to just me again. And then, we had quite like a cool new kitchen business that are becoming quite popular in London, especially. They're like WeWork, but for food businesses. I don't know if you have them in the States. I'm sure you probably do, because you guys are usually 3 or 4 years ahead of us.
What is the business you're talking about?
So it's like a concept that helps food businesses get kitchen space. So it's like you have access to commercial kitchens, but you just pay like a membership, and then it's like a big WeWork, but with a commercial production kitchen that everyone has access to.
Got it. Okay.
So when I moved there, I all of a sudden was surrounded by loads of other solo founders who have various skill sets, different to mine. And the environment was super helpful, because, you're able to ask for help and speak to other people who, have perhaps been in business longer than you, or have had the same failures as you, and they can, help guide you. So that was definitely one aspect, I think, that was the first bit of support, was actually just joining a community, and then you don't need to hire people or pay people. You just join a community of other business owners, and you get a wealth of knowledge to share with each other, and that's for free. So I think that was my first step. And then after that, we moved into production, basically. So we hired people to help produce the product, because that was what was taking up most of the time. So we've had a couple of employees, kitchen-based employees. It's basically still been just me working in the background on things. I also still work in the kitchen as well. But as of March, we will be hiring, we'll be looking to hire marketing people. We'll be looking to hire operations managers or various other roles. So yeah, exciting. It's coming up. So March should be a big turning point for us.
That is very exciting.
I'm not sure how much you guys watch Shark Tank, but
Oh man, love it.
yeah.
So
So
I was Dragon's Den, the English version, but
okay,
still same concept.
gotcha. Well, I noticed one of the main so on Shark Tank, I feel like food industry products tend to be some of the ones that get shot down the most because all the sharks talk about how difficult it is to get that into the market and to be successful. You, on the other hand, have taken something in in the food market, and you have boomed very quickly. You're already talking about hiring operations managers, marketing teams, having conversations with bringing your product to the U.S. What do you think has contributed to that success outside of just the deliciousness of the product itself? And what would you say for anyone who is maybe also trying to get into, a food product as well?
Yeah, I think I like the word deliciousness, by the way. It rolled off the tongue nicely.
That's it.
Yeah. So I think definitely, deliciousness is an important factor of any food product. Unless it's, a food product that perhaps is, solving a problem, maybe it's like more health related or something like that, then flavor isn't essential. But my product in particular, it needs to taste good. So that's again why we had that sort of 6-month period of product development and recipe development until we were happy with the finished product. But I think, to be honest, it's a tough one. And I think I've only perhaps been confident to answer confidently in probably the last 3-4 months, because at the beginning, when it's food, it's so subjective, and I loved it. My friends loved it. My family loved it. But, you never know if friends and family are being completely honest or not. And so I think it's difficult to know if you've got a good product at the beginning. So, I think elements outside of that is when you start to get positive feedback from strangers, from retailers. We've had a few mentions in, magazines, and then you start to think, okay, well, damn, we've got a pretty good product now. But off point a little bit there. But yeah, so to answer your question, I think outside of the flavor, you need to have a strong story, because at the moment in the UK, a lot of shoppers and consumers are moving away from buying from like giant corporations and big brands. And even the big brands are launching more sort of fun artisanal products, because a lot of people they're more conscious when they're shopping, and they want to shop small, and they want to shop from people. I think people buy from people, right? So if you have a strong story behind your product, it's going to help sell. I think we have a strong story, and our brand comes across authentically, and what we're trying to do is authentic, and we want, to share something that we're passionate about with other people. And I think that's helped. And now we have the sort of data to show that that's helped. So, yeah.
So how did it feel for you getting that first sale? Like, what did that feel like for you, seeing like, okay, the proof is here. It's not just my friends and family maybe, lifting me up a little bit. How did that first sale or couple sales feel for you?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, like just so motivating and so fulfilling. I think, again, in the farmers market, it's like you sell a product to people, you give them a sample, and then you give them like a pitch, and you talk about your story, and they love it, and then they buy your product and they come back next week. I mean, actually, we still do a farmers market every Sunday. I was there today, and I was serving 2 customers who had never been to my stand before. And then a lady came up who had bought 3 jars the previous week. She came up and she was like, "Thank you for making the best product I've ever had." And she was
wow.
It was so, and like, even now, still, like 14 months into this business, those moments are the ones that just make you feel so good because, you've created something that somebody really enjoyed and they've told their friends about it. And then they've come back to your stand to tell you how much they love it. And yeah, those moments they just make everything, all the, sleepless nights and all the hours and hours and hours stood at the fryers making chili oil, it just makes it all worth it when people tell you those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you have gone from making those first couple of sales to a couple of your flavors have actually won a pretty prestigious award there in the UK. Am I right about that? Can you tell us, briefly like what that award was, how you won that? What is the criteria and tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, that was mad. So it's international now. So it's a company called the Guild of Fire Food, and they do an annual Great Taste Award. So in the UK, it's a really, really big deal. It's like, if you see the Great Taste like stamp on a product, you're like, damn, this must be good. And it makes you buy it. So we entered our products, we entered two of them, actually, the Sichuan chili crisp and the garlic chili oil with beef. And we launched the business in November and the entries in January. So it was straight after. And then the results don't come out till August each year because they have 2023, they had 14,500 products entered.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. Like I think they had entries from 140 countries as well last year. So like it's completely nuts. And basically they put everything into a category, and then during that period from January to June, you'll get a call up that it's your category's time. So you send your products in, and then they're sent around a room blind. So you can't use your packaging. It has to be in like a neutral jar. And then you get 150 character description to write. And 150 letters goes quick. So when you're trying to in 150 letters, you have to talk about your brand, product, the ingredients, the processes. It's super hard. So then they get to read this thing, and then they taste your product. And the room have to be unanimous in their decision. Otherwise, you don't get your reward. And we got 2 stars on both of our entries, which is the second highest tier. But in terms of chili oil, there were only 7 winners of 2-star in 2023. And we had 2 of them, which was nuts.
Wow. That is...
I bet that felt really
incredible.
Really great, as especially being, a relatively new business, to then have that type of feedback.
Yeah, it was insane. I'm pretty sure I did a few laps of the house just screaming.
Do you remember what the 150 characters were?
I probably still have it on my notes, man. Yeah, I think it was something like a Sichuan, or a super savory and umami Sichuan chili crisp made with premium Sichuan peppercorn powder and Argentine chilies imported from Chengdu, handcrafted in London. So it was good. It was a good paragraph, but
that is good. Also, real quick, one thing to touch on, just for anybody in the audience that may not be aware, you've mentioned Chengdu several times. That is, to be correct, the region where your peppers come from, which is that right?
Yeah, it's the capital city of Sichuan province, which is in the southwest of China. So sort of at the foot of the Himalayan mountains, China side. Yeah, it's a massive city and home to Sichuan peppercorns and pandas. But I'm more interested in the peppercorns. So yeah, the products that we have are inspired by that region of China.
Just being that you started this journey, and admittedly you said, there were definitely things that you kind of didn't know from the beginning. And now being where you are, where your products have won awards, you've got a really solid brand. What advice do you have for people that are maybe starting from ground zero? They want to have a business, but aren't really sure maybe the trajectory. Do you have any advice, kind of steps that they should be taking, or things that they should maybe learn before jumping in?
Yeah, I would say, definitely try not to think of a giant list of tasks, because I think when you do, that's when you're just going to put it off, because it seems unachievable when, how am I going to do this and this and this and this and this and this? Just start really small and start, just something simple, something that you enjoy. If you love design parts, why don't you start working on the logo? If you like cooking and if it's food, get the product developed and, get some feedback, get it out there. And I think I mentioned before, the ball just really starts rolling. And if it's something that you're passionate about, once you start, you won't be able to stop. And yeah, so just make that step and sell a couple, just get out there. Even if you're just, sell it, just go on the street and just give stuff out if you want to, just sell stuff and get your face around, and you'll really start to see that it is quite easy. You just need to take that first tiny step, and then the steps just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're already on your way.
Awesome.
Tom, this has been amazing. I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. I know that I've personally learned a lot throughout this, and I hope that the audience has taken away a lot too, because you've given some really great advice. Before we get out of here, just want to, ask you, could you tell everyone in the audience, where do we find your product? Where do we find you on social media? How can we go about purchasing your product and giving the Sichuan chili oils a try for ourselves?
Yeah, man, of course. Well, as you said as well, it's been a really enjoyable conversation. I hope, there's been some valuable points that people can find useful, and I wish anyone who's listening to this the best of luck in their ventures as well. I think, starting your own business is a huge accomplishment in itself. So give yourselves a massive well done if you've even started, because that's amazing. And so, yeah, our brand, sorry, forgot about that. We, Yep Kitchen is the brand name. Yep is our short name. So you could just go ahead, type in Yep Chili Oil, something like that on Google, and you'll find us. And we sell our products online. We're now stocked in about 65 stores around the UK. We have a couple of big listings in Selfridges and Panzer's Deli. And we are in talks with a US distributor as well. Very, very, very early stage.
Yes. Awesome.
But hopefully we can think about getting our products to the US as well, and we can give Fly by Jing a run for their money.
There you go. Exactly. Tom, again, just seriously want to thank you a lot for being here. Really appreciate the conversation and your time. And we'll let you get back to whipping up some chili oil, man.
Yeah, well, my partner has made some tacos and I'm buzzing. So
there you go. Do you put the chili sauce on the tacos?
Every time, man. Every time. Get out of here.
That's how you know it's good then. All right.
Yeah.
Going cross cuisine there. So, all right, Tom, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks so much, both of you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.